This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. When you visit the doctor, you probably hand over your insurance, your ID, and contact details. It's just one of the many places that has your personal info. And if any of them accidentally expose it, you could be at risk for identity theft. LifeLock monitors millions of data points a second. If you become a victim, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year at lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Hey, Olivia from Ollie here to help you ease into all things back to school. Homework, meal prep, and pickup duty piling up? Goodbye Stress Gummies help you keep your cool. Start the day with Kids Multi and Probiotic for digestive and immune system health. They'll love to take them, and that makes mornings easier. When back to school gets real, Ollie helps you deal. Find these and more at ollie.com or retailers nationwide. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Welcome back, True Crime Army. I am your host, Margot, and this is Military Murder, your one-stop shop for all things true crime. Whether it's old stories or new stories, I have you covered. And today, I have some stories for you. Seriously, what is up with all these cases lately? I feel like there are way too many active military cases going on right now. And if it's not a military member, it's a veteran. And honestly, I am not okay with this. Straight up, 6 years ago when I started this show, I thought that I'd be telling you old cautionary tales. I definitely didn't think that I'd ever have enough new cases to have an entire monthly headline segment dedicated to just new cases. Yet, here we are. For today's headlines episode, I have a few stories. And trust me, you are not going to want to miss a second of any of these stories. From another mass shooting that occurred on a base to a Marine who allegedly poisoned his girlfriend to cause an abortion, each story is equally jaw-dropping. One thing before I begin, I did want to mention, did you know that I have a YouTube channel? Yes, most of my recent One Case episodes are actually over on YouTube. So if you want to support me there, check out my YouTube channel at Mama Margot. That's M-A-M-A, and then Margot is spelled M-A-R-G-O-T. But another quick update. The case I brought you recently of the former Navy JAG Nicholas Casotis, well, that case is officially closed, and he was convicted of all the charges. He was sentenced to life in prison, and you know what? He was so shocked. If you want to know how that case wrapped up, make sure you check out my coverage of that case over on my other podcast, The Alternate. With that, let's get into today's headline cases.
Military murder is an independent project and is not endorsed by the Department of Defense or any military component. The views expressed are those of the host. The content of this podcast is not meant to be legal or medical advice. Warning, this episode contains graphic details of murder and is not suitable for young listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
The biggest headline recently was out of Fort Stewart. A routine morning at Fort Stewart, Georgia, turned into a scene of terror when an active-duty Army sergeant opened fire on his fellow soldiers. On August 6, 2025, Sergeant Cornelius Radford, 28 years old, suddenly pulled out a personal handgun and shot 5 coworkers in his unit's office area. Chaos erupted as gunfire rang out and smoke filled the hallway. One soldier collapsed, wounded on the ground. But the rampage was cut short within minutes by the incredible bravery of other service members on the scene. You see, there were other people who were unarmed but undaunted. Several soldiers charged directly at the armed assailant, tackling Radford and pinning him down until military police arrived. Army Secretary Daniel Driscoll later praised their heroism under fire, stating, quote, "One of the soldiers tackled the person. They were unarmed and ran at and tackled an armed person who they knew was actively shooting their buddies," end quote. Another soldier immediately jumped on the shooter to help subdue the shooter. The selfless actions of many of these soldiers saved many lives. In the aftermath, fellow soldiers sprang into action to care for the wounded. Staff Sergeant Melissa Taylor, a former medic, recalled hearing a gunshot and seeing smoke. Quote, "I saw a soldier on the ground. I immediately sprinted over and started rendering aid," end quote. And she was one of the people who was helping the injured victims. Within moments, multiple soldiers were providing first aid. Thanks to these efforts, all 5 shooting victims survived. 3 were treated and released from the hospital the next day, while 2 remained hospitalized in stable condition and were expected to recover fully. Military officials would not speculate on why Radford did what he did. They couldn't speculate what his motive is, and actually, until this day, it remains a mystery. However, there were chilling clues that emerged about his state of mind the morning of the shooting. Just hours before the shooting, Radford sent an ominous text message to a family member. In a note to his aunt, he wrote that he loved everybody and that he'll be in a better place because he was about to go and do something. Now, this cryptic message suggests that Radford anticipated either a violent ending or a suicidal outcome. In fact, those words were the only warning. His father spoke out and said that he had not noticed anything unusual about Radford's recent behavior, and that when he heard that his son was the alleged shooter, he was at a loss of what could have triggered the attack. Unofficial reports later hinted at personal struggles. Former colleagues revealed that Radford had endured bullying over a speech impediment early in his Army career, and that he had complained to others of racial harassment at Fort Stewart. He had also suffered personal tragedy, although it's unclear whether this personal tragedy was recent, but he did lose his mother at a young age, and he also lost a close friend in a car crash. He allegedly also battled with bouts of depression. Whether these factors contributed to his deadly outburst is still unknown. What is clear is how swiftly the Fort Stewart community responded that day. Parts of the base went into lockdown during the incident, and nearby schools briefly sheltered in place until an all-clear was given. Within 8 minutes of the first shot, the situation was under control. Military and federal law enforcement took Radford into custody, and the base commander emphasized, once he was taken in, that there was no further threat to the community. In recognition of the valor of these 6 soldiers who sprang into action this day, all 6 soldiers received the Army's Meritorious Service Medal for intervening during the shooting. Among them was Staff Sergeant Aaron Turner, who was identified as the first to tackle the gunman, and Master Sergeant Justin Thomas, who helped restrain the shooter. At a ceremony the following day, 6 soldiers stood at attention as Army leaders commended their courage. First Sergeant Joshua Arnold was said to provide immediate aid, including stopping bleeding and helping to secure the scene. Master Sergeant Justin Thomas assisted in restraining the assailant, preventing further harm. Staff Sergeant Melissa Taylor rendered immediate assistance to wounded sailors and also secured the scene. Staff Sergeant Robert Pacheco was a combat medic who provided critical medical care to the wounded. Sergeant Eve Rodarde, also a combat medic, she provided critical medical care and stabilized the injured. And Sergeant Aaron Turner, he worked with Master Sergeant Thomas to restrain the suspect, and as I stated earlier, he was the first one to take him down. First Sergeant Arnold praised how instinct and training kicked in for the unit, stating, quote, "No one froze, no one lost their composure, everyone maintained their bearing," end quote. Meanwhile, Sergeant Cornelius Radford remains in pretrial confinement. The Army has charged him under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and the case will be handled in a military court-martial. He has been charged with 5 counts of attempted premeditated murder. This horrifying incident could have actually ended in more tragedy, if not for the split-second heroism of those Fort Stewart soldiers that I just mentioned. The Army secretary lauded these soldiers, telling the Fort Stewart troops, quote, "Your grit, your resilience, your training took a terrible day and made it much less terrible than what it could have been. The heroism shown under fire is something we should all aspire to," end quote. In the face of a comrade's betrayal, these soldiers upheld their creed to never leave a fallen comrade and undoubtedly saved lives on that August morning. The quiet mining town of Anaconda, Montana, population 9,000, was shattered by a mass shooting at a local bar, followed by a tense week-long manhunt through the wilderness. And it all began on the morning of August 1st, 2025, at the Owl Bar, a beloved neighborhood tavern. At around 10:30 a.m., Michael Paul Brown, 45, walked into the bar that he frequented, and actually he lived right next door, and he opened fire on the staff and patrons inside. In the span of just a few moments, 4 people were ruthlessly gunned down. The victims were later identified as the 64-year-old bartender Nancy Lorette Kelly and 3 customers, Daniel Edwin Bailey, 59, David Allen Leach, 70, and Tony Wayne Palm, 74. All of these victims were long-time locals, well known in the tight-knit community. Authorities have not yet revealed the motive, but Brown was reportedly familiar with most of the victims because, as I stated, he lived literally right next door to the Owl Bar, and he actually frequented the bar. After the shooting, Brown immediately fled the scene, triggering fear and chaos. In a bizarre twist, investigators say that he discarded his clothes and escaped in a stolen vehicle shortly after the massacre. That escape, when he took his shirt off, was caught on surveillance camera. And with this, a manhunt of massive scale ensued. Within hours, local and state law enforcement, FBI agents, U.S. Marshals, and even helicopters were swarming the area, searching for Brown in the rugged mountains and forest outside of Anaconda. Authorities discovered the stolen Ford F-150 pickup that he had used, and it was abandoned in the woods and stocked with supplies. There was clothing, food, and outdoor gear, all of which suggested that Brown had planned to hide out off-grid for a while. For 7 days, fear gripped Anaconda. Over 250 officers from 38 different agencies joined in the hunt. Initially, a $7,500 reward was offered, and that was then increased to $10,000. But the big break in the case finally came on August 8, 2025. Acting on fresh leads, tactical teams concentrated a large force, around 130 officers, on this hilly area that they had searched prior. The intense pressure apparently flushed Brown out of hiding. Officials believe that the heavy presence of officers on the hill drove him into open terrain. At about 2 p.m. that Friday, Brown was spotted and apprehended near a barn about 5.5 miles from where the shooting took place. He was reportedly still armed when captured, but he surrendered without firing any shots. In the end, Brown was taken to a hospital for a checkup, then promptly booked into the Deer Lodge County Jail on homicide charges. Now that Brown is in custody, the focus shifts to justice for the victims. The homicide investigation is ongoing, and prosecutors are preparing a case against Brown for 4 counts of deliberate homicide, which is Montana's equivalent of first-degree murder. Little by little since the shooting, a picture of who Michael Brown is has emerged. He's a U.S. Army veteran, a former armor crewman who served from 2001 to 2005, and he even deployed to Iraq from 2004 to 2005. After active duty, he spent a few years in the Montana National Guard until 2009. Family members after the shooting revealed that Brown struggles with PTSD and other mental illnesses and has for several years. Relatives reportedly sought help for him, but apparently, he didn't get the help he needed. Despite those struggles, though, nothing excuses the horror of what happened. And now we have to wait to see what the evidence will reveal at trial.
This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Buying a car shouldn't eat up your week. That's why Carvana made it convenient. Car buying that fits around your life, not the other way around. You can get pre-qualified for an auto loan in just a couple of minutes and browse thousands of quality car options, all within your terms, all online, all on your schedule. Turn car buying into a few clicks and not a full week's endeavor. Finance and buy your car at your convenience on Carvana. Financing subject to credit approval. Additional terms and conditions may apply.
The Twisted Tale of Amanda Knox is on Hulu. In 2007, Amanda Knox was studying abroad in Italy. She had no idea her dream would turn into a nightmare. Inspired by the actual events of her wrongful conviction and 15-year fight for freedom, watch the new Hulu original series, The Twisted Tale of Amanda Knox, now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus for bundle subscribers. Terms apply.
In an almost unimaginable family tragedy out of Middleburg, Florida, a 14-year-old by the name of Trevor Lee stands accused of shooting both of his parents to death. The shocking incident unfolded on Sunday, August 3, 2025, in the Lee family's suburban home. According to the Clay County Sheriff, an argument erupted between Trevor and his parents that night, and at some point, the teen retrieved a firearm that belonged to one of his parents. In the violent aftermath, the teen's father, 44-year-old David Lee, and his mother, 45-year-old Brandy Smith Lee, were found dead from gunshot wounds in their bedroom. The community was stunned. Friends described David and Brandy as loving parents and Trevor as an ordinary kid who was about to start high school. How could something so horrific happen in a, quote, normal family? What Trevor did immediately after the shooting adds another layer of heartbreak. In the early hours of Monday, August 4th, the 14-year-old called 911 from a church and confessed to what he had done. After the shooting, he walked to a nearby church, and apparently he was there to seek refuge and seek some sort of absolution, and that was where he called 911. On the 911 call, the boy's voice is kind of trembling, and he told the dispatcher that he had just killed his parents and didn't know what to do. He told the dispatcher, "Hey, I don't have a gun. I left it back home. I am unarmed, and I will be standing here in the middle of the church waiting for the police." In an extraordinary moment captured on the call recording, Trevor asked the dispatcher to pray for him, and the operator said, "I will definitely be praying for you, son." When officers got there, the 14-year-old surrendered without incident. Now, around the same time, a second 911 call came in, and the caller was Trevor's 19-year-old sister, Ayanna, who was serving, I believe, in California in the military. She was out of state when Trevor texted her a horrifying confession about what he had just done. When she received that text message, Ayanna was panicked. She didn't know what to believe, whether it was true or not, but she called the Florida authorities to ask them to conduct a welfare check. But by the point that she had called 911, it was too late. The authorities were already there because by that point, Trevor's 911 call had already come in. Deputies had found the grisly scene in the Lee home after Trevor called them himself. Inside the house, authorities discovered David and Brandy deceased, and there was evidence of a domestic confrontation. Sheriff Michelle Cook later confirmed that the shooting occurred after a family dispute of some kind the night before. The exact nature of the argument has not been made public. Those who know the family, they have really struggled to reconcile this tragedy with the 14-year-old Trevor that they thought they knew. Ayanna, Trevor's adult sister, spoke to local media to express her disbelief. She said, quote, "I am shocked, honestly at a loss for words that this has happened," end quote. She described their family life as relatively normal and happy. They joked around, they played video games, they went to the movies. They were a, quote, regular family, and there were no issues at all. Ayanna portrayed Trevor as a bright young man who loved football and was popular with friends. By all outward accounts, he wasn't a troubled kid. Ayanna emphasized that she loves her little brother despite what he's being accused of. Did he make a mistake? She said. Yes, a huge one. But my little brother, he isn't a monster. That plea, "he's not a monster," underscores the family's pain. They are mourning their parents and just fellow loved ones from the community. Legal proceedings against Trevor Lee are moving forward, and the case raises difficult questions because of the suspect's young age. Florida law, however, allows minors to be charged as adults for very serious crimes. And the prosecutors in this case, it's Florida, they have moved swiftly. A Clay County grand jury indicted Trevor on 2 counts of first-degree murder in mid-August. This means that he will indeed be charged and tried as an adult, despite the fact that he's only 14 years old and hadn't even started high school. On August 19, 2025, Trevor appeared in court for his arraignment. Clad in an orange jail jumpsuit, the teenager stood before a judge to hear the charges. He spoke softly as his attorney entered a plea of not guilty. The judge noted that due to the severity of the charges, the case belonged in adult criminal court. A trial date has been tentatively set for February of 2026. For the Lee family, there is only heartbreak. David Lee and Brandy Smith Lee were laid to rest in a joint funeral attended by hundreds of community members. I did find that David Lee is a veteran, and I believe he was in the Navy. And the reporting on whether Brandy Smith was also a veteran is very vague, but I do know that David Lee was definitely a veteran. I will say that they are both remembered as loving parents, and David was reported as even coaching his son's sports team throughout the years. This next case is a cold case solved, and it had my head spinning. It had been nearly 47 years since 18-year-old Cornelia Humpher was found stabbed to death along a country road in Schweinfurt, Germany. Her murder, a cold case that haunted investigators for decades. But decades later, there was a break in her cold case. In a stunning breakthrough, authorities identified a suspect after 45 years, former U.S. Army soldier Tommy Molina. But not only did they identify a suspect, Germany successfully extradited this ex-soldier from the United States to face trial in Germany by the German courts. This case reached its dramatic conclusion this summer, 2025, when Molina, now 71 years old, was convicted of Cornelia's murder by a German court and sentenced to life in prison. Do you know how rare this is? I mean, it is really rare, and when I read this case, I did like a double take. To understand the significance, we have to go back to April 20th, 1978. Cornelia Humpher was a German teenager. She was 18 years old, just out of high school, and she was in love and expecting a baby. She was roughly 8 weeks pregnant at the time of her murder. The father of her unborn baby was allegedly U.S. Army Private First Class Tommy S. Molina. He was 24 years old back then, and he was a soldier stationed in Germany. However, womp womp, Molina was married to someone else. Cornelia was his secret girlfriend. According to court records, the two met up one evening in Molina's white Fiat car on a dirt road outside of the town. This is when Cornelia dropped a bombshell. She revealed that she was pregnant and she was keeping the baby, and she was going to tell Molina's wife. What happened next was truly horrific. Rather than face the consequences, Molina attacked Cornelia, stabbing her 14 times in the back and neck with a 5-inch knife, effectively killing her and her unborn baby. He then dragged her body out of the car and left it by the roadside, driving off into the night. Cornelia's body was discovered the next day, April 21st, 1978, by locals, but at that point, nobody knew who had done this to the young woman, and the case went cold. Although suspicion did turn to Molina early on. You see, he was questioned because witnesses recalled Cornelia dating an American soldier, and someone had seen a small white car, kind of like a Fiat, in the area the night that she was murdered. And they knew it was owned by an American because it had U.S. military license plates on it. In 1978, German police even noted tire marks at the crime scene that matched Molina's Fiat, and also a diamond pattern imprint on Cornelius's clothing, which was consistent with the floor mats that were in Molina's Fiat. However, with this evidence, the case still went cold because Molina denied everything. When he was first interviewed back in the 70s, he claimed an alibi. He said, "I was with my wife, Linda, the whole time, so I couldn't have done it." His wife, she was brought in and questioned, and she actually couldn't remember if he was home or not, which really wasn't a solid alibi, but they didn't have anything else, so they lacked proof. And with that, German authorities couldn't make an arrest. The case eventually went cold, and Molina, who was American, he returned to the United States after his Army service. For decades, Cornelia's family had no answers, but the case was never forgotten. In 1995, there was a major lead that emerged. Molina's second wife came forward with a disturbing story. That wife, named Cindy, reported to U.S. Army officials that Molina had drunkenly confessed to her years earlier, claiming that he killed a pregnant lover with a knife in Schweinfurt. This bombshell prompted German police to reopen the investigation. Still, Molina continued to deny involvement when confronted. There really wasn't anything else. So the case went cold again. And it was with the advent of modern-day DNA technology when this case would finally be cracked open. In 2021, as part of renewing the investigation, a court in Schweinfurt issued an arrest warrant for Molina. German authorities obtained a DNA sample from Molina. Reports indicate a sample was taken around 2020, and they ran it against the old evidence. In a dramatic result, Molina's DNA matched samples from Cornelia's clothing, specifically from 5 separate spots on the stockings that she wore the night she was murdered. This was forensic proof investigators in 1978 never had. Armed with DNA evidence and the old physical clues, Germany formally charged Tommy Molina with murder. But first, they needed to jump a very big hoop: extradition from the United States. Molina, by this time, was living in a small town in Nebraska, a 70-year-old likely thinking he'd gotten away with, murder back in the day. But in July of 2023, U.S. Marshals tracked Molina down and arrested him at home in Nebraska, and they were arresting him on the German warrant. Molina was not going down without a fight, and he fought the extradition in U.S. courts. His American defense lawyer argued, among other things, that the DNA sample had been obtained improperly. Molina claimed his blood was drawn without due process, though presumably it was done via a court order. He also pointed to the decades-old witness statements of his ex-wife, of course, as unreliable. However, in April of 2024, a U.S. federal judge rejected Molina's appeals and cleared the way for extradition. The judge found no constitutional issues with the evidence gathered and agreed that Germany had a strong case. In June of 2024, Molina was finally extradited to Germany. The trial began in February of 2024 in Schweinfurt District Court with a 3-judge panel. By the way, did you know that Germany does not have jury trials for murder? I had no idea, but apparently they did away with that back in the 1900s. Anyway, at the trial, prosecutors laid out the affair, the pregnancy, and the forensic evidence tying Molina to Cornelia's death. The court learned that Molina had been long suspected but avoided prosecution, partly because he left Germany when his army tour ended and could not be compelled back during the Cold War era. They heard how DNA from a 2021 sample matched multiple points on Cornelia's knee-high stockings, a damning link placing Molina at the crime scene. They also reviewed the historical evidence. Remember, there was the matching tire impressions, the pattern from his car mat on Cornelia's shoe, and witness accounts of a car just like his at the crime scene. In his defense, Molina continued to assert his innocence. His lawyer argued that some physical evidence was missing or degraded over time, and that the DNA on the stockings did not establish that he killed her. The defense also called the wife's 1995 report hearsay, but ultimately, the weight of the evidence convinced the judges beyond a reasonable doubt. On July 29, 2025, the verdict came in. Tommy Molina was found guilty of murder in the slaying of Cornelia Humpher. The court noted the particularly cruel circumstance, killing a pregnant teenager to cover up an affair, and sentenced Molina to life imprisonment, the maximum in Germany. In German legal terms, life typically means a minimum of 15 years before being eligible for parole. But listen, he's 70 years old, so it's effectively the rest of his life. Molina does intend to appeal.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. From streaming to shopping, Prime helps you get more out of your passions. So whether you're a fan of true crime or prefer a nail-biting novel from time to time, with services like Prime Video, Amazon Music, and fast free delivery, Prime makes it easy to get more out of whatever you're into or getting into. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to learn more.
The Conjuring: Last Rites. On September 5th.
I come down here, I need your help! Lorraine! Lorraine! Lorraine!
The Conjuring: Last Rites. Only in theaters September 5th. Rated R.
This episode is brought to you by JCPenney. Yes, JCPenney. And if you've been there recently, you know it's the place to go for jaw-dropping looks at brag-worthy prices. They've got something special for every style and budget, not to mention rewards and deals that make finding those hidden gems even sweeter. If you already shop JCPenney, you're already in on the secret. But if not, it's time to ask. Wait, am I sleeping on JCPenney? Shop JCPenney.com. Yes, JCPenney.
This next case is our last case, but it has blown my mind. And by the way, it's a civil suit case, not a criminal case, at least not yet, but it is a wild, wild story. A groundbreaking and disturbing lawsuit has been filed in Texas that reads like the plot of a thriller, a story of love, betrayal, and the alleged poisoning of an unborn child. A woman named Julia, and Julia is a pseudonym used in court filings for privacy, is suing her former romantic partner, Christopher Cooprider, for the wrongful death of their unborn baby girl. What makes this case extraordinary is the allegation at its core. Julia claims that Cooprider, a U.S. Marine pilot trainee, secretly laced her drink with abortion pills to force a miscarriage when she refused to end her pregnancy. Julia, 30, and Cooprider, 29, were neighbors at a Corpus Christi apartment complex and began a relationship in early 2025. In March of that year, Julia discovered she was pregnant with Cooprider's child. She was overjoyed. The baby was a girl whom Julia affectionately named Baby Joy during the pregnancy. Julia was already a mother of 3 from a previous marriage, and she was really looking forward to welcoming this new daughter into her family. But Marine Cooprider did not share her excitement. According to text messages later revealed in court filings, he immediately began pressuring Julia to get an abortion, insisting that a baby would ruin both of their lives. He sent a barrage of messages and grew increasingly hostile when Julia stood firm about keeping the child. In one especially chilling text message, Cooprider told her, quote, "Choosing to have that thing will mess with your life. It will be bad for you, your kids, and that poor thing. It would be better off not being around," end quote. Referring to their unborn baby as that thing and saying it shouldn't exist illustrates Cooprider's mindset at the time. Julia responded by asking him to stop harassing her, but Cooprider persisted. When coercion failed, Cooprider allegedly took matters into his own hands in a devious way. You see, Cooprider found a way to procure abortion drugs illegally. The lawsuit states that Cooprider ordered abortion pills online from Aid Access, which is a European-based telemedicine service that ships abortion medication to all 50 states, even in the states where it's banned. And did you catch the part where I said that this case was in Texas? Under Texas law, nearly all abortions are outlawed after about 6 weeks. So these pills were obtained outside normal U.S. healthcare channels. Aid Access, run by a woman named Dr. Rebecca Gompertz, sent Cooprider a package containing the standard 2-drug regimen. I am going to absolutely butcher these drugs, but I'm going to do it anyway. The first drug was mifepristone and misoprostol. All right, I butchered it. Someone's going to comment, but anyway, it is what it is. So the first one is mifepristone and the other one is misoprostol. Well, Cooprider had these pills delivered to Julia's address without her knowledge. Evidence later showed a pill shipment with his name on it had arrived and was signed by someone at her house. Anyway, that part of it is a little bit confusing. The whole point is that the shipment was shipped and somebody received it, and the shipment came in Cooprider's name. So, on the night of April 5th, 2025, Cooprider set his plan into motion, according to the lawsuit. After sending her all these messages, like, you got to get rid of the thing, you got to get rid of this baby, well, he decided to kind of try to smooth things over. So on the night of April 5th, 2025, he offered Julia, kind of a bonding night. He called it a night to build trust together, a night where they could just relax and bond over warm, non-alcoholic drinks. They could watch TV and they could just snuggle. Julia thought, oh my gosh, that sounds like a great idea. Like maybe this guy is finally coming around to the idea of being a dad. So she said, yeah, let's do it. That night, Cooprider showed up at Julia's house with some hot chocolate packets, which he offered to mix for them before they sat down to watch TV. While he's making the hot chocolate, Julia goes outside to let her dog back into the house. Well, the lawsuit claims that in that moment when Julia was not looking, unbeknownst to her, that's when Cooprider allegedly pulverized and dissolved at least 10 abortion pills and put it into Julia's hot chocolate. The lawsuit notes that misoprostol, whatever is called, that pill, they are meant to dissolve usually in the body, and presumably he crushed them, both that pill and the other pills, multiple pills by the way, into the drink. When Julia returned, she sat down on the couch with her boo and she drank the hot chocolate while they watched a show together. All was well, until it wasn't. Within about 30 minutes, the effects hit Julia like a nightmare. She began experiencing severe cramping, pain, and heavy bleeding, which You might not know this, but these are classic signs of a miscarriage. Panicked and in agony, Julia cried to Coop Ryder that something was very wrong. He feigned concern and was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to take you to the ER immediately. But first, let me go pick up your mom who lives nearby because that way she can stay with the kids here at the house while I take you to the ER. Julia was like, oh my gosh, that's perfect. Go pick up my mom. She lives right down the block. Then you can take me to the hospital. After Coop Ryder left, Julia waited and waited and waited. And guess what? Coop Ryder never returned. He never picked up her mom, and also he never responded to Julia's phone calls. Instead, he later sent her a text message that simply read, quote, I'm sorry, I have to go to my flight tomorrow, end quote. And he suggested, well, I just can't help you anymore. Julia suddenly realized Coop Ryder had abandoned her in the midst of a medical crisis, and she still needed to go to the hospital, so she called another friend who rushed her to the hospital. But before leaving for the hospital, Julia stumbled upon some damning evidence in her very own house. She found an open box labeled mifepristone with Coop Ryder's name on it, empty of the pills. And then she also found an orange prescription bottle containing only 2 misoprostol pills out of what should have been 12. 10 misoprostol pills were missing. In that instant, Julia realized what had happened. Her lawsuit states, quote, Coop Ryder had poisoned her and her baby with the abortion pills, end quote. He had then lied and delayed her from getting help, possibly hoping that the miscarriage would be completed before it was possible for her to seek help. Well, Julia's friend picked her up. She also brought the pill packaging with her to the ER as evidence, and she handed it over to the Corpus Christi police that very night. Tragically, by the time she got to the hospital, there was nothing the doctors could do. Julia miscarried her baby at approximately 8 weeks gestation. And the thing about this case is that it's virtually impossible to medically prove that an abortion drug caused a medical miscarriage because there is no blood test that can detect that. However, the civil lawsuit argues that the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming. The text messages, the pill remnants, and the timeline of the events. Corpus Christi police has opened a criminal investigation into Coop Ryder, but as of the latest updates, no public criminal charges have yet been announced. But they might be coming depending on what the investigation reveals. Remember, Texas is one of the states with laws recognizing an embryo or fetus as a potential victim of crimes, except, of course, in cases of the mother's consent to an abortion. While the criminal side unfolds, Julia decided to take action to civil court. On August 7th, 2025, she filed a federal wrongful death lawsuit against Coop Ryder and Aid Access, which was the provider of the pill. And she filed this in the Southern District of Texas. The suit, filed by attorney Jonathan Mitchell, which is a prominent anti-abortion lawyer known for the Texas Heartbeat Act, seeks monetary damages for the wrongful death of her unborn child, baby Joy. Under Texas civil law, surviving parents can sue for the wrongful death of an unborn child due to a wrongful act. This is thought to be the first case of its kind where a mother is suing on such grounds because someone forced an abortion on her. And this is for civil court, by the way. In the past, it's usually been fathers suing abortion providers, but never the mother suing for being surreptitiously dosed. The lawsuit also goes after Aid Access and its founder, accusing them of violating Texas law and even violating the federal Comstock Act by mailing abortion pills into a state where abortion is outlawed. Julia's team argues that sending the pills that facilitated this murder of her unborn baby makes the provider complicit. They are asking for nominal, compensatory, and punitive damages. Essentially, they want to punish Coop Ryder and the pill supplier and deter others from similar acts. Coop Ryder, who is reportedly an Arizona resident, has not publicly commented, and Aid Access's Dr. G also declined to comment. Julia's horrific experience is sadly not entirely isolated. There have been a few criminal cases in recent years of men secretly spiking women's food or drink with abortion drugs, which what in the actual hell? I have not heard of this. So let's hear about it now. So there was a 2018 case out of Florida where a man was sentenced to 22 years for slipping his girlfriend an abortion pill. She noticed the powder and didn't drink it. And in 2014, another man got nearly 14 years for tricking his wife into taking an antibiotic that was really an abortion pill. What's different in this case, in Julia's case, is her use of Texas's aggressive anti-abortion statutes as a weapon against her perpetrator. Texas law now equates an embryo or fetus with a person in many legal respects, except to punish the mother. So she and her lawyer are leveraging that to seek justice for baby Joy's death. Where does this case stand now? The lawsuit has, no kidding, the ink is still wet on the signature because it was just filed. So it's still in its early stages. It will likely face jurisdictional and legal challenges, especially with the inclusion of an overseas entity, Aid Access. Aid Access might contest being sued in a U.S. court at all. If the suit proceeds, it could set a precedent for holding a third-party pill provider liable in cases just like this one. For Julia, though, this fight is deeply personal. She's suing the man that she says she once loved for effectively murdering their unborn daughter. The emotional impact on her is enormous. She had already endured abuse in her previous marriage, as noted in the text messages. She told Coop Ryder her ex-husband had been abusive. To then have her hopes for a new baby dashed in such a violating way left her traumatized. In interviews under the pseudonym, Julia said that she wants to speak out so that other women realize this is a real threat and to push lawmakers to hold perpetrators accountable. Quote, "It's like something out of a movie. You never think the person you trust could do that to you," end quote. And that was what one of her friends commented. Unfortunately, True Crime Army, as this case shows, it does happen. True Crime Army, these headline cases really make my stomach turn. From the Fort Stewart shooting, which, by the way, I had a friend text me right away within an hour of it happening, or within whatever, when everyone was posting about it on social media. She sent me the message. I'm praying for everyone, and that was just really heartbreaking. But from, getting those text messages and reading about that to this last case, about a poisoning, I always wonder what is truly wrong with people nowadays, And I don't want to get religious here, but I recently saw a word-only meme. Those word-only memes where they just say, it's just words. And this is what it said. The word-only meme read, quote, "Do I really need Jesus to get to heaven?" Response, "Bruh, you need Jesus just to go to Walmart," end quote. I chuckled when I read that meme, or when that meme came across my social media. But deep down inside, I know it's true, because when you leave your house, you never know what to expect. All right, True Crime Army, if you are interested in hearing headlines cases once a month, let me know in the comments or in the reviews, or reach out to me. I've heard some people say that they like them, others don't say anything. I really do want to know if you want me to continue doing these. I actually really like doing these because it helps me to dig into the news and see what cases are coming down the pipeline. My sources for today's headlines episode include articles by The Guardian, Army.mil, People, KTVU News, ABC News, Fox News, Action News, JAX, Stars and Stripes, Texas Scorecard, The Washington Post, and that civil lawsuit. All right, with that, True Crime Army, catch me next week. And until next time, remember, you never really know what someone is capable of, so remain vigilant always. You have a fabulous week, and I'll keep digging to bring you another military murder story next week.
Mama's working on her podcast. I don't want to.